I'm sorry, I have not seen Rector. Can we ask you for a word of welcome?
Yes, of course. Yes, with pleasure.
Yes, Professor Piotr Stepnowski, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Yes, hello, good afternoon, good evening. For all the participants, I'm very pleased to give you a welcome word to this very event. As you know, quantum information as a scientific discipline is one of our main scientific branches of the University of Gdańsk, and I'm more than pleased to support all the initiatives undertaken both by faculty and National Quantum Information Center in Poland, which we are the host of. I also very much adore the patronate or commemorate of one of the most famous Polish scientists, Roman Ingarden, whose name is very well known in Polish scientific committee, but also internationally recognized great mathematical physicist, professor at the our neighbor university in Torun. I'm also very happy that even though we would be much more in favor to host you in a conventional form, we can meet in this mode of communication, and therefore having also participants from other parts of the world. Nevertheless, I always give a warm welcome to all our colleagues, our friends, to visit University of Gdańsk, to be with us, to work with us, both under auspices of the National Quantum Information Center, as well as University of Gdańsk. So obviously, I wish you only very good discussions and fruitful impressions during this very meeting. Have a good time, good science, and see you in Gdańsk, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Rector. Thanks for the invitation to Gdańsk. We will come at some point. And now, as a first speaker, I have a great pleasure to introduce to you Professor Krzysztof Ingarden, an architect. On one hand, a grandson of great Polish philosopher Roman Witold Ingarden, but for us it's even more interesting, a son of Professor Roman Stanisław Ingarden, the physicist we know even better. So Krzysztof, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Professor Ryczkowski, and thank you very much, Professor Miłosz Michalski from Poland, for inviting me to this session tonight, especially then that I'm not a physicist, I'm not a mathematical physicist, I'm an architect, as Professor Ryczkowski mentioned. So I'll not be able to comment on my father's theories, but I would like to present you a short biography of my father, illustrated with some pictures from family archive. Most of the pictures, well, big part of the pictures were done by my grandfather, who was a philosopher, but his hobby was photography. So he was photographing, well, many subjects, but also people, also very keen of taking photos of people, and also, of course, of our family. So I'll try to share my screen now. Well, can it be seen? Can you see my screen?
Yes, everything is perfect. Yes, you can. We can.
All right. So I'm starting because I was given 15 minutes, so I'll try to be very short and quick. My father was born on October 1st, 1920 in Zakopane, south of Poland. Well, why in Zakopane? Because at that time, my family, they were living in Torun. but the war was coming from the east side. The Soviet army was coming close to Warsaw. So my grandfather thought that his wife better give birth in Zakopane, where the place was safer and far from the war front. So he sent her to Zakopane, and that's where my father was born in 1920. And on the picture you can see Tatra Mountains, and Zakopane is just on the foot of Tatra Mountains. And this is the picture showing 3 generations of our family, and the picture was taken in Toruń. On the left, you can see my father's mother with the youngest son, Janusz. In the center, you can see my father's father, my father's grandfather, sorry, Kajetan Ingarden, with my father in front of him, and on the right, my father's father, the philosopher, Roman Ingarden philosopher, with Jurek, which is the middle son. And who were they? My grandfather, Roman Kajetan Ingarden, was a water engineer. He graduated engineering department in Vienna, and then worked in water engineering services in Przemyśl, Kraków, also in the Ministry of Vienna. He was a consular for the imperial court in Vienna as well. He developed the first systematic studies and the regulation of Vistula River in Poland, and designed what is very important here in Kraków, designed and built and organized actually a sewage network, first sewage network for Kraków at the end of 19th century. And after Poland regained independence in 1990, he became the president of the General Directorate of River Regulation at the Ministry of Public Works. My father's father, Roman Witold Ingarden, Roman Witold, I'm saying Roman Witold to differentiate it from Roman Stanisław Ingarden. Well, they both were Romans, and it was a reason for many mistakes. He was a philosopher, starting his studies under famous Kazimierz Twardowski in Lwów. But after a short time of studies in Vienna, he moved to Göttingen and then to Freiburg to study under Edmund Husserl. He finished his studies with him in 1918 with the thesis, PhD thesis on Bergson. Together with Edith Stein, who was Husserl's assistant and very close friend of Roman Witold Ingarden, they were the closest Husserl's collaborators at that time. In the 20s, from the 1920 to 26, he worked in Toruń as a teacher of mathematics. In 26, he moved to Lwów, and that is the place where my family and my father, they stayed for about 20 years. From 1933, he became the professor of Jan Kazimierz University in Lviv. And then after the Second World War, he was a professor at Jagiellonian University. My grandmother, so the mother of my father, Maria Adela Józefa Ingarden, he was a doctor of medicine. He was ophthalmologist, that is the oculist. And my father, he has written some remarks on my mother. He said, my mother was well educated as the oculist. She knew foreign languages, mainly French, German, Latin. She was always kind and sincere and understood the psychology of older people and adolescents as well. She liked fiction, read a lot and contributed to the tradition of having a large home library. And now the generation of my father. My father was the oldest brother. His younger brother was Jerzy Kazimierz Ingarden. He was a pilot in Royal Air Forces in England during the Second World War. How did it happen? You know, he was a young student in Lviv in 1939, and he was arrested at that time in Lviv on conspiracy allegations and sent to labor camp in Siberia. And in 1941, he joined General Anders' army, and through India, he reached England in 1944, where he was trained as a pilot. And he had a crash. He lived through the crash accident in England at the end of the war, and died in 1949 due to some complications after the accident. And the youngest son, the youngest brother of my father, was Janusz Ingarden. He was the architect. Most of the time after the Second World War, he spent in Kraków, where he designed many major buildings here. In the years 1966 to 72, he was a city architect, member of Polish Architects Association. He was also a university teacher. So, and my father, the oldest of the three brothers, born in 1920. Here you can. I wanted to show you some pictures from his Lvov period, where he stayed from 1926 to 1945. It's almost 20 years. His whole adolescence took place in Lvov. So his memories of that place was very strong. Summer holidays, the family used to spend in Zakopane, where Zakopane is south of Poland, so that was the center of it was not only holidays, but the center of social meetings among intelligentsia at that time. And my grandfather used to go there quite often. And his close friend in Zakopane, but not only in Zakopane, was Stanisław Ignacy Witkiewicz at that time. He was not educated as a philosopher. He was a writer. But he was a philosopher from his passion, as to say. And they were very close friends, discussing many philosophical problems during this stays in Zakopane, meetings in Lvov, in Kraków also. Witkacy was a painter also, and he used to draw portraits of my grandfather and grandmother. These are portraits of my grandmother, did in 1935 and 1939. He drew many portraits, maybe altogether there are 10 of them. You can see my grandfather on the right side, the big portrait. Some of them were very strange, like this on the left side. What is written here, it's because of shortage of time, I drew him as a Hindu. Well, my grandfather didn't like this type of things because he thinks it's like a kind of, shortcuts, taking shortcuts on portraits. And these two small portraits were my father's brothers. You can see Janusz in the middle and Jerzy, George, on the right side. Unfortunately, Witkacy never drew the portrait of my father. And I once asked him what happened, and he answered, probably I was never at home at that time. Well, in Lvov, they were, when they moved from Toruń to Lvov, they were living at Jabłonowskich 4th Street. This is the picture of the building from this time. And here you can see my father with his mother. And 1 year before my father's death, I took him to Lviv on a sentimental trip to Lviv. It was the first time for him after the Second World War to go and to see. He was 90 years old at that time, but I think he became very enthusiastic and energetic at that time, recalling old memories. Here you can see him. He recognized the apartment they were living in Lviv at the time. And here is, on the picture, you can see on the corner, the very famous Stefan Batory Senior High School on the left side, the entrance on the left side. And this school was connected together with another school, the Nicolaus Copernicus Senior High School, or here on the right. So my father started his studies at Stefan Batory Senior High School, but he was then moved to, well, he moved to, or his parents moved him to Nicolaus Copernicus Senior High School, which he finished with Abitur. And here he was kind of surprised that the entrance gate to the Stefan Batory High School looked like this and was permanently closed, so we couldn't enter. And we were also checking famous cafes in Lviv, where scientists and well, artists were meeting at the time. And we found famous Cafe Roma, looked like this, so it was a regular restaurant, which was a little bit disappointing probably for my father. We also visited the optical factory of Jan Bujak. It was the first place where my father worked. He worked here at the beginning of, just before the Second World War. And he said that he learned to calculate the lenses at the factory. So his interest was optics at the beginning. In the 1938, Roman Ingarden began studying physics in Lviv. He completed his master's degree in 1946 at the Jagiellonian University of Kraków, so after the Second World War. And however, still before getting his degree, he started to work in 1945 at the Silesian University of Technology, which was then located in Kraków. But it was for a very short time, because in August 20, he moved to Wrocław in 1945, where he started to organize physics at the Wrocław University of Wrocław University and University of Technology, which both schools were connected at that time. And here you can see a very interesting picture from the 50s, taken by my grandfather, who I guess he visited my father in Wrocław. This is the main market square in Wrocław. You can see these old automobiles there. Very, very interesting picture. And my father defended his PhD in 1949 in Warsaw University, and his supervisor was Professor Rubinowicz. In 1949, he was appointed deputy professor, 54 professor, and in 1960 full professor in Wrocław. Here you can see another nice photograph of the landscape, urban landscape in Wrocław from the 1957. So you see the city was still destroyed and the Cathedral of St. John not renovated yet. Now it's renovated. Well, to sum it up, his career in Wrocław, well, you can see from 49 to 52, he was the head of the chair of theoretical physics, and his famous students were Jan Łopuszański, Zygmunt Galasiewicz, Szczurówna Rybarska, Pawlikowski. From 1950 to 56, he was the head of the Institute of Mathematics of the Polish Academy of Sciences. 56 to 66, head of the Geometric Optics Group at the Institute of Physics of the Polish Academy of Sciences. 55, he organizes laboratory for low temperatures, a unit of the Institute of Physics of the Academy of Sciences. In the 60, he was the chair and head of the chair of solid state and low temperatures physics. And in 68, he got a scholarship to go to study in New York. He in Wrocław, I was born actually in Wrocław at the time. So you can see this is the picture taken of my father with my mother on the right side, and on the left side, my grandfather, the philosopher, with his camera on the neck. He was always carrying his camera. So this picture was taken in 1963, I guess, in Wrocław. And here, very historical picture from 1963, taken by my grandfather. It's my father with myself. So you can see the portrait of my father taken in Wrocław at his apartment. In 1966, Roman Ingarden moved to Torun, which he liked very much because this moving to Torun reminded him of his young years. He spent the first 5 years of his life in Torun, so he had some memories from that place. He started his work at Copernicus University on the invitation of Professor Jabłoński. His closest scientific collaborators in the institute in Torun were professors Kosakowski, Dębiński, Czajkowski, Jamiałkowski. He started as the head of the Department of Thermodynamics and Radiation Theory at the Institute of Physics. From 1969, he headed the Department of Physics. From the year 86, the Department of Statistical Physics. In the years 1969 to 1978, he was the director of the Institute of Physics. And he retired in the year 1991, but still participated in the life of the university. In 1996, he became an honorary doctor of the Nicolaus Copernicus University. And in the 60s, he was the originator and the first editor-in-chief of the journal Reports of Mathematical Physics. From the 70s to the 80s, he was a co-organizer of the International Symposiums of Mathematical Physics. And during these years, he was very often a visiting professor and worked in many countries, including United States, Japan, Germany, France, and other places. And it was very interesting because since 1970, he started to be very much fascinated with Japan. He started many collaborations with Japanese scientists at the time. And from that time, he started to study Japanese language, actually, which I could observe myself. He was studying the Japanese kanji every day, actually, until almost until the day of when he died. So in 1975, it was the year of his first journey to Japan on invitation of Professor Makoto Matsumoto from Kyoto University. And 1 year later, in 1976, he was a visiting professor at Hokkaido University, next year in Tsukuba University, and then also some other universities, Nagoya, Chiba, Tokyo. Here you can see some photographs of my father together with Makoto Matsumoto, sorry, it's a misspelling, Matsumoto, not Katsumoto, in Kyoto. And on the right side, later in the 80s, he started collaboration with Professor Masanori Oya from Tokyo University of Science. I wanted to show you some pictures from Tsukuba. Actually, this was the house on the left upper corner, the house where my father was living during he was a visiting professor in Tsukuba. You see, it was a small house in the middle of rice fields. On the left bottom picture, you can see the way from the institute to this house in the middle of woods. And he was very keen on studying Japanese. You can see he also calculated how many hours he spent on studying Japanese language. 1975, 37 hours, 77, 22 hours. So these were the courses he was taking during his visits in Japan. And here some diplomas after finishing Japanese language courses from many places. In 1994, my father was awarded by the Emperor of Japan for the promotion of the Japanese culture and language, as well as for the scientific collaboration between Poland and Japan, with the Order of Sacred Treasure, gold race with neck ribbon, which is a very high Japanese order. Here you can see the memorial photo from that ceremony. In the center, my father. On the left, Japanese ambassador Nagao Hyodo. On the right, wife of the ambassador. And other people are the family members, our family members. Here, the moment after decoration. On the right side, Ambassador Nagao Hyodo. On the left side, my father. It was 1994. 2010, the 42nd Symposium on Mathematical Physics in Toruń. It was also the occasion to celebrate my father's 90th birthday. You can see during the conference, during the symposium, my father in the center. He was 90 years old at that time. And the lectures were given by Professor Andrzej Jamiałkowski, by Professor Kosakowski, also by Professor Michalski during that time. And the mayor of Toruń, Michał Zalewski, awarded my father with an order. And some pictures from my father university room. You can see his library behind and in front of him, of the papers surrounding him. He was always surrounded with books and with his work. And on the back, some kanji, Japanese kanji, which he studied. And I would like to finish my presentation by some remarks given on Roman Ingarden by Professor Andrzej Jamiałkowski just after his death. They are so nice, so I wanted to read them. They were given in Polish language, but I tried to translate it as far as I could. Professor Jamiałkowski, his close collaborator in Toruń, but also for some time the rector of the university, said like this: he was incredibly creative. New ideas were constantly born in him, I think. Not all of them were possible to be implemented. Some were too enthusiastic, but thanks to this, he was the creator of an extremely creative atmosphere at the university. During one of my first meetings with the professor, we talked about issues that still seemed like a dream back then. Imagine that for the past 15 years, there has been such a thing as quantum information theory, and it has been developing a lot. Professor Ingarden formulated his first assumptions in this field in the early 70s. In 76, his work on the subject was published in our journal, Reports on Mathematical Physics. The world only began to be interested in the subject several decades later. He was ahead of his time. In Toruń, he wanted to create a strong research center in the field of mathematical physics. He built a strong team, which I had the honor to be part of. He dreamed for funding a scientific journal. He succeeded in the early 70s. Today it's hard to imagine, but those were the times we were getting paper for printing this was the problem. If we count the books, we have published over 200 volumes to this day. Meetings of the editorial board for the journal turned into conferences of mathematical physics. It is the longest series of conferences in the field of physics organized in Poland. Professor is also the founder of Open Systems and Information Dynamics, which is currently in the world the most cited Polish journal in the field of science. In certain circumstances, in a sense, he was ahead of his time. His creativity was above average. What's more, he was able to convince people to implement his ideas. This was the case, for example, with a series of physics textbooks that we created in the team. My father died in the year 2011 on the age of 91 years old. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Krzysztof, for really a great talk, and we enjoyed it very, very much. Now, could you please stop sharing your screen?
Yeah, okay.
Thanks. So I will again try to share mine. Yes, I hope you can